We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. Benjamin Franklin. Hey there, welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. My name is Roger Whitney. I'm your host. This show is dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement, but actually have the confidence to lean in and rock retirement. That's important. I'm excited about today's show. We're going to do three things today. Number one, we're going to talk about some late minute gift buying. I'm going to give you some suggestions that will please your family and friends. Two, we're going to answer your questions, which is always fun to do because they're so important and they're so thoughtful. And three, we're going to preview a regular segment that's starting next year. Right now, I'm calling it the Rock Life segment, the non-financial segment. And we're going to rotate between some pillars of things that you need to be intentional about in order to have a great life and live a great life. It's going to be your mindset, how you make decisions. It's going to be energy. It's going to be relationships and your passion, why you get out of bed in the morning. Today, we're going to focus on energy with Dr. Bobby Dubois, who's going to be doing that one throughout next year. So I'm excited about that. So before we get to those two things, let's talk about gift buying. It's hard to buy gifts for people, especially adults, people that have quote unquote everything. My philosophy has generally been to buy experiences as much as I can. I think experiences create memories, they create stretching, and those are lasting, much more than, say, a pair of socks. Not that I don't like the occasional pair of socks. So that's generally been my philosophy. As you get older, I think gifts get a little blah. And I think games are a great gift to give people. If you're not going to take them out to dinner or do something that creates a memory, I think games are a great thing to do. We like to play games in our house. I own a lot of games, thank you, Joel Sosehi, from Stacking Benjamins, that I have played with Joe. He's really a geek on this stuff, and there's some complicated games. But the games I'm going to recommend that you consider as gifts for yourself or for others are going to be games that you can play relatively quickly, and they don't take multiple YouTube videos to learn how to play. So these are just table games where you can have your cocktail or have a side conversation going and not feel like you have to be all in and focused on one thing. And these are perfect for wide ranges of ages as well. So I'm just going to share some games. These come from games I have played, but also I think I mentioned one of the games on the list a few weeks ago, and I had people email me some suggestions for games as well. So they include some of those. I got 9 or 10 games for you, okay? Number one is a game called Sequence. You can have up to 4 players, I think 4 players, or if you play doubles, you can have, up to 4 players, I think is what you can have actually. Sequence is a great game. I'm not going to tell you too much about them because you can go Google these things and we'll have links to them in 6 Shot Saturday. Quicks is another game that we're really into right now. And they have Quicks Mix, which makes it complicated. It actually works your brain, which is fun. So Quicks is definitely one. As a Midwesterner, I would encourage the entire world to learn how to play euchre, which is a card game where you have a partner. There's 4 people that can play. So you need 4 to play, and you're going to play with a partner. And it's a simplified, simplified version of like Pinochle or things like that you can play. It takes a little bit of attention and strategy, but not too much. To give you an example, I learned to play it in college. So that's a great game. I love euchre. Everybody should learn how to play euchre, mainly a Midwest game. Another game is called Left, Center, Right, which is a card game. LCR, I think is what it's referred to. Ticket to Ride is a board game. It takes a little bit more time, but it's an enjoyable game, and they have variations of Europe where essentially you're building railroad tracks. Pictionary, those interaction games, Category, I would throw in there with Pictionary where you're standing up and you're doing things, very interactive and loud. So you want to, for a party game, it's great. I have not played this game, but I threw it in here just because I thought it might be appropriate. So forgive me if I'm wrong. There's this game called Cards Against Humanity that can get very crude and very crass. But I saw this in a store and I'm like, oh, that's a cool little take on it. And it's called Kids Against Maturity. I have not played it or seen it. So if you were going to buy it for kids, I would do a little internet research, but it sounded like a fun thing. Kids Against Maturity. Play 9 is a fun game, also called Golf. You can play it with your own cards, or they actually have a Play 9 game that you can buy. Another one is Triominoes, a take on dominoes. My wife and I will play that together. A few more that are from listeners. This one's from Douglas, and it's called Spoons, where essentially you put spoon. It's like a musical chair type of thing. If you have 4 people, or say if 6 people playing, you put 5 spoons in, and then you deal out cards. And as soon as a certain card comes up, everybody has to grab a spoon, and the person that doesn't grab the spoon takes a strike, or they get knocked out. I forget exactly. Spoons is fun, Douglas, but it can get aggressive. And my wife can't play spoons because her hands hurt so much. It's like they can get in the battles there. So you want to be careful. You have the right family dynamic. And we've scratched, I think one time we scratched our neighbor's table. But spoons is definitely fun. Our next suggestions come from Frank, who I know is a longtime listener because Frank and I have interacted via email and 6 Shot Saturday. So thanks for replying, Frank. He had a series suggestion first, and that is managing the later stages of retirement. That's a great one, Frank, and we are bringing series back next year. We're going to do series. I think the first one we're going to do is going from 2 to 1. That could be married to widowed or married to divorce, and then we're going to do a lot of other themes, so that's a good one. Frank's suggestions are Skip Bow. I've never played it. Exploding Kittens or Minions. He says there's lots of variations. Rubik's Cube, I've played that. Sequence you had. Quirkle, I think it's fun. Backgammon, and he says, beware, this can become obsessive. And you're correct, Frank. I actually learned to play backgammon, which is an extremely old game, with my grandfather, who was a very stern kind of dude when I was growing up. And we would play backgammon, and it is obsessive. I would say that I am almost an expert player, if I do say so myself. But it is a fun game, and I know they have apps for this. But man, backgammon is one of those rainy day games for sure. And he does have a gaming tip, Frank does, which is reading directions can be painful. They're not extremely well written most of the time. And there are tons of YouTube videos that will show you how to play games. So that's a great suggestion, Frank. So those are some suggestions on things to get family members. I'm going to tell you one, but I'm going to have to be quiet because my wife is downstairs. And she actually got it for her brother-in-law. She loves the national park signs. You know, the big wood signs that you have when you go into a national park, where you can actually get custom ones made on Etsy, where they're real wood and everything, and put the person's name. So I did that for Shauna. And I think that's a great gift if you're a big outdoors person. All right. So those are some last minute suggestions that are not very expensive, can help create fun the day you get them, and help create hopefully good memories, as long as it's not an aggressive game of spoons. With that, let's move on and talk with Tanya and answer some of your questions. Today's show is sponsored by Cozy Earth. If you have somebody on your Christmas list that is really into luxurious things, wrap them up in Cozy Earth this holiday season. They've been rated as one of Oprah's favorite things, and all their products are made from responsibly sourced viscose from bamboo. I don't know what viscose is, but I do know that the sheets that we have for our bed and the men's loungewear, I bought a hoodie for myself, is so soft and comfortable that it's my favorite hoodie now. And most importantly, my wife thinks I look great in it. So check out CozyEarth.com for a full range of bedding, men's loungewear, women's loungewear, and bath accessories. And they provided an exclusive offer. If you enter RAM at checkout, you'll get 35% of all the site, and you should be able to get this stuff for Christmas. So go check out Cozy Earth at CozyEarth.com. Questions. We all have questions, and let's answer some of yours. If you have a question for the show, you can go to rogerwhitney.com/ask Roger and leave a typewritten question or an audio question. Audio questions get a little bit of a fast pass just because we'd love to hear your voice. So if you want to get it on maybe a little bit quicker, that's the way to do it. Our first question comes from James regarding Social Security. James says, apparently, this is not very clear. I just turned full retirement age and am still working full-time with benefits. I want to file for Social Security and continue working. It appears that I can do this, but no one ever talks about this scenario. And it also appears that I have to get on Medicare when I apply for my Social Security benefits. But I don't want to do that because I currently have healthcare benefits through my employer. Of course, when I retire, I want to go to Medicare, and this whole process is really not clear. Can you advise me? All right, James, let's walk through this scenario of applying for Social Security while still working and how that interacts with Medicare. So what will you experience if you apply for Social Security at full retirement age and still work full-time? So by drawing your Social Security check now and working for full-time, you're likely to pay higher taxes because if you get over the earnings limit of Social Security, you're going to have some of your Social Security taxable. If you enroll for Social Security at your full retirement age, that will automatically trigger Medicare Part A. So that's the part that you don't pay for. So Part A is going to be triggered when you apply for Social Security, and that's unavoidable once you reach full retirement age. You can delay Part B, Part D, but the Part A is unavoidable. And by having any part of Medicare that turned on, this means you won't be able to contribute to a health savings account in the event that you have one of those programs through a high deductible insurance policy through your company. Now, when Part A turns on, that will coordinate with your employer's medical insurance if you end up in the hospital. And Boomer Benefits actually has a really good article about this, is can you get on Medicare without Social Security? The good news is that by continuing to use your employer's medical insurance, even though you will have an increased income, you won't be dealing with IRMA surcharges. And as far as how you turn on Medicare later, that generally is going to be within 8 months after you leave employment through your work and lose that coverage. Now, COBRA doesn't count for that. So it's 8 months after you leave work or stop being covered by the employer plan. And that's what I mean by COBRA doesn't count for that. So if you continue on with COBRA for 18 months, you'll be beyond that 8-month period and you could find yourself in some trouble. James, this stuff can be really complicated and can be some gotchas in navigating when to start those other parts of Medicare and whether to sign up for Social Security at all. I would suggest that you contact Boomer Benefits. They've been a past sponsor on the show. Prior to that, and even today, we use them in our practice as a navigator to help make sure that you follow the rules and you don't catch yourself in the bind to, well, suddenly you're going to have to be insurable or potentially even have a higher premium because you've delayed. So even though you want to stay on your employer coverage, if you're going to apply for Social Security, I would contact Boomer Benefits and they can help navigate that. They're really good in my experience of not trying to get you to buy something. They're very consultative in that way. That's been my experience and the experience of everybody that I've had that's interacted with them. That way you can make sure that you maximize this benefit and not get caught by anything. And Boomer Benefits has a bunch of educational resources. Danielle's great at that. boomerbenefits.com/new-2-Medicare is a good site to start to understand this playing field. So the key here is if you apply at full retirement age, you're going to get on Part A, but it will coordinate with your employer's health insurance. You're not going to be able to contribute to an HSA if that's something that you are interested in. And then once you lose coverage, you have 8 months to get on the other parts of Medicare. And check out Boomer Benefits as well. Our next question comes from Jennifer on what to do with a settlement. She says, hey, Roger, I'm 52, hoping to retire at 60. I have $2 million in retirement accounts. It was 2.7 last year. Sounds like you're a little aggressive there. I have a house with a mortgage of $450,000 at 2.99 interest and a condo with a mortgage at $380,000 balance at 5.99% interest. The house has about $500 in equity. The condo has about $200 in equity. I will be receiving a check of $300,000 from a personal injury case, tax-free. Should I put that money in an index fund? Essentially, should I invest it or should I put it towards one of the higher interest mortgages? I know the conventional wisdom says to put it in an index fund and it will earn about 10% as opposed to paying off a 6% mortgage. But if it was a recession and stock market has low returns for the next 5 or 10 years, like the 70s, I'm not quite sure what to do. So the central question here is, what does she do with that settlement money? When you have money, there are 5 things that you can do with it, Jennifer. And number 1 is you can spend it. Number 2 is you can give it away. Number 3 is that you can pay down debt. Number 4 is you could just save it as cash savings. And number 5, you could invest it. I can't think of 5 other things you could do. I guess you could burn it. So those are the 5 options that you have with this $300,000. Ideally, you would have a plan of record of your pathway to age 60 and where you want to end up. And you would have a updated net worth statement to create what-if scenarios of where do I allocate this $300,000 amongst these 5 different options. Now, in terms of spending it, let's talk about spending it. Number 1, that could be for simply increasing your lifestyle and maybe enjoying a little bit of this money. It sounds like you went through something that caused you some trauma in order to get this $300,000. So maybe you treat yourself a little bit. 2 is perhaps you have some ongoing medical issues that you need to account for as a result of this injury and using some of this money to help defray that cost so you're made whole. That would be the next consideration. So those are the 2 things that come off the top of head in terms of spending it. Now, you could give it away, potentially to charity. If you're charitable minded, you could do any portion to that. 3, and you brought this one up, is you could pay down some debt. Now, you talked about your house and your condo. Your mortgage rate on your house is 2.99%. It's funny, I have I'd say I want to create a t-shirt that says 2 5/8 30-year fixed, which is my mortgage. About 2-3 years ago, I was going to pay it off and decided not to. And now that's like a subtle flex because mortgage rates are a lot higher. It's like, look at me. But anyway, that's a good rate. And then you have this condo that's about 6% mortgage with a $380,000 balance. Now, if you pay, let's say you take this $300,000 and put it towards the condo, you will have a return of 6%, relatively guaranteed because you're no longer going to be paying that interest. Then you'll still have about an $80,000 balance on that mortgage, depending on how the length of this mortgage, et cetera. So the benefit would be you no longer have to pay the 6% compounding. So that's a guaranteed return. Not really going to help your cash flow in the near midterm because you're still going to have a balance of $80,000, but you're going to skip ahead on that amortization table and pay this off a lot quicker. But it's not going to help you cash flow right now. So I think that is a reasonable thing to do. Now, one thing I would ask you about the condo, and I think you should consider, is what is the purpose of this condo? Is this something that you plan on selling in the next 2 to 5 years? If that is the case, it may not be as beneficial to put all that money towards the condo because you're just going to get that money back in the near short term through selling the condo, and you're going to zap a lot of your liquidity. So something to consider, if this is a long-term condo that you're going to have for a long period of time, getting that thing paid off might not be a bad idea, or working towards getting it paid off quicker. But if it's shorter term in nature, that might lead me against paying off the condo. Now, what about saving it? Saving it is different than investing it in that you could just simply put it in a savings account. You could put it in like 6-month treasuries. I just bought some 6-month treasuries the other day, and they're around 4.7%. So you're not really losing relative to the interest that you're paying on, say, that condo mortgage, because there's a spread there, but not significant. The advantage of saving it, Jennifer, is that you're going to have a lot of liquidity. Money, it's going to give you an option to decide what to do with this money later on. And so the way that you might think about that, Jennifer, is how much liquidity do you have right now? Do you have enough cash reserve so you feel comfortable in the event you lost your job, or for upcoming expenses, you got to replace the roof, you want to upgrade the condo, all those other types of things? You want to have enough cash reserves to cover extraordinary expenses that you know are coming up in the next year or two. and you want to have a cushion for life happening in some way. And I don't know where your situation is there, but before I paid off the mortgages, I would make sure you had enough cash reserves to feel like you had a shock absorber in the event that life happens to you. This doesn't seem very efficient, but it's like an airbag. An airbag costs, back when it was an option, $3,000, $4,000 extra. You may never, ever use it, but is it worth having? For sure, because it will stop your face from hitting the windshield. A cash reserve will figuratively stop your face from hitting the windshield if life really hits you hard in some way financially. It's probably a bad analogy, but you get the point. So I want to make sure you have cash reserves. So I would go there before I went to the debt. Then lastly, do you invest it? Do you, quote unquote, get the 10% on average return? What's interesting about that 10% number, which comes from the S&P 500 historical return going back to 1926, and it's right around 10%, people round that number. Do you realize only a handful of times has the annual return been within a percentage either direction of 10% of the average, meaning 9% or 11%? On an annual basis, the average really means nothing. And I think you get this, Jennifer, in that it can be all over the place. You're going to get bad returns like this year, good returns like a couple years ago. 10%, the average doesn't really mean much. If you have enough assets invested, I would shore up these other areas. So as I'm thinking about it, I would focus on the cash cushion, then consider accelerating the debt payoff of perhaps the condo, because that's a guaranteed 6%, and then wait a little bit of time. If you have a plan of record where you have identified the pathway between age 52 and age 60, this becomes a lot easier to figure out. Because if you don't have a plan of record, you're unmoored and you're just looking at these in an unorganized way. Another option that I just thought of is you could not pay off the mortgage, and perhaps this $300,000 could help you work a little bit less. If you say you're an hourly worker, work a little bit less because you have some more cushion to help fill in the gaps of what that extra income might have covered. Now, that doesn't sound financially the best thing to do, but it could buy you some time freedom right now that was a little unexpected. I like to poke around in different ways because for some people that might be the answer. Hopefully that gave you a survey of the options ahead of you and my preferences. This becomes so specific to the person. I want to help give you at least some framework to think about it and thinking of those 5 areas, priorities being cash reserves, then paying the mortgage off, but not at the expense of draining all of your cash reserves, and then spending, or then investing. I would put it in that order. All right, our next question comes from Sheila regarding investment philosophy. Sheila says, my husband and I currently work with an advisor to help advise us on investing approximately $2.7 million in retirement assets. We also have about $500,000 at T. Rowe Price. I'm retiring in March. We have a wide range of diverse investments, including bond funds, individual bonds, equity funds, ETFs, and it is split approximately 50-50 between equities and fixed income with a good cash cushion. We meet quarterly to discuss adjustments and other questions. Generally, I'm happy with the advice and support we're getting, including retirement planning, and I make it a point to educate myself as much as possible so I can make reasonably informed decisions. My question is whether I should seek to simplify how our funds are invested to reduce a few index stocks and bonds, to reduce it to a few indexed stocks and bonds. What are the pros and cons of such approach? Hey, Sheila, thanks for the question. And we answered something similar, I think, with Tanya a week or so ago. In my experience, from an investment standpoint, individuals, including advisors, tend to overcomplicate things. Now, this can happen a couple different ways. One is simply that you bring legacy investments, and rather than change those, you make tweaks around the edges. And if you have things that maybe you bought 10 years ago or a different advisor, or maybe the same advisor, and then as they evolve or you evolve, you start to add different things, but you never subtract. And you end up with what I call the cluttered closet of investments, of just stuff you have. It's good enough that it doesn't make sense to throw away, but you're never really going to wear it anymore. It's easy to do that with your investments as well. The other way that I've seen this happen is when an individual or an advisor feels like complicating it and looking for nuanced type of things feels productive and it feels like it justifies the value of their existence. A lot of advisors traditionally thought of themselves as portfolio managers, and they could read the markets, they read the Wall Street Journal, just all the stereotypical stuff. And during client conversations, having a more complex portfolio gives a lot more to talk about, which, and this is just my view, avoids the issue of talking about the things that are really important, that are a little bit more personal and strategic. They just can stay in the tactical. This is what this sector did. This is what that sector did. This is why we made this move and that move. That is where the conversation stays rather than the bigger questions, where most investment manager-centric advisors aren't really that well-versed. And so they're more comfortable in that tactical stuff. Now, I don't know your advisor, and I'm not suggesting that's the case, but these are the two ways that I've seen these kind of portfolios build up. You have bond funds, you have individual stocks, you have equity funds, you have ETFs. You say that they're all in retirement accounts, so it doesn't sound like there's a lot of tax implications in any kind of changes. I like to make sure that the battlefield is cleared. So this would be my counsel, Sheila, is clear the battlefield. I do think simpler investment approaches makes more sense. It doesn't even really matter whether they're index funds, actively managed funds, whatever your jam is that you feel comfortable with, but the fewer moving parts, the easier it is to manage. And that's going to allow you to do a couple things. One is it probably will help you save some cost, some friction in terms of paperwork and tax accounting. Well, these are retirement accounts, so that doesn't come into play. Less things to track, because the bigger decisions from an investment standpoint are going to be the allocation between equities, fixed income, and cash. And there you may go a layer or two below that. And having all these different pieces is just a mess to have to account for and rebalance and do all the things that you need to do. And it distracts you from doing more important things, building your pie cake, thinking about tax strategy, and so forth. So I think simpler is better, especially in retirement accounts, so you can focus on higher value activities. The best way to start that process, is, if you agree with that, is to come up with what the allocation should be for each individual account. And that allocation should be focused on when you're actually going to use that money, a la the pie cake. So liquidity, income floor, upside, and determine exactly how you're going to pay for your life when you retire in March, what accounts those are going to come from, and then that will determine the allocation of that specific account or accounts. And then you can look at what you want the end result to look like, whether it's 3 index funds, 4 or 5 mutual funds, whatever it needs to be. Come up with what should be. Then you can reconcile how to get from here to there. I think that's a good approach, because you want to know exactly what you want the finished house to look like before you start building and making changes. Once you have what it should look like based on covering your cash flows now and hopefully in the future, how you reconcile that, especially in a retirement account where you don't really have any tax consequences, is really simple. That would be the first step in starting to simplify things. Usually the cons of simplifying things come around in taxable accounts because we have embedded capital gains, or we're trying to manage some asset placement for tax consequences and tax efficiency, etc. But it doesn't sound like that's the case for you, Sheila. So hopefully that helps give you a framework, and have a great holiday. Our next question comes from Dom. Dom says, I just retired and did have income this year. Congratulations on your retirement, Dom. Can I still make a Roth contribution for 2022? I think the answer is yes, as long as I meet the income requirements. Dom, you are exactly right. As long as your income is below the threshold that allows you to make a Roth contribution. And for 2022, if you're single, the modified adjusted gross income for making a Roth contribution begin phase out at $129,000 of modified adjusted gross income. If you're married, the phase out begins at 204,000 modified adjusted gross income. So assuming you're below those, go for it, Dom, as long as you have the money to be able to contribute. And you can make that contribution up until April 15th of 2023. Now going forward, Dom, if you happen to pick up some part-time work and have earned income, as long as you have the earned income to support it, you can continue to make Roth contributions within those income limits. So go for it, buddy. With that, let's move on to our Rock Life segment and bring on Dr. Bobby Dubois and preview some of the stuff we have coming in 2023. All right. Now, this is a teaser, I guess, because this is coming in 2023. But every week on the show, we're going to have a new segment focused on so it's a horrible branding, but the non-financial aspect of retirement. And what we're going to do throughout the month is we're going to have 4 segments, one every week, on mindset, energy, building yourself to have the energy to go rock retirement, passion, the things that you're going to pursue that make life meaningful, and then obviously the relationships. And joining me for as of now, I'm calling it the energy section that we're going to do every month is Dr. Bobby Dubois. Hey, Bobby.
Hello.
You may remember Bobby from our functional health series that we did, I think it was August, which was a great series. And we're going to start integrating a lot of the things that you talked about on a monthly basis. And I appreciate your passion to do this because Bobby has a big passion for this. So what are we going to talk about today, Bobby? Actually, before we do that, there are 3 legs that you refer to, and I think those are good pillars. What are the 3 legs when it comes to building energy in our lives?
Well, as we've talked about, it's important to rock retirement to have the financial wherewithal to do it. It's important to have a reason to wake up in the morning, your purpose. But if we don't have the energy or our health, it's really not going to get us where we need to be. So it's a really critical piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And in the segments we did earlier in the year, we talked about exercise, we talked about nutrition, we talked about working in the healthcare system as you might get ill or a loved one gets ill. And this is really just a continuation of those themes. And I'm excited today to talk about one new one that probably people haven't heard about.
You don't get this stuff right, the money doesn't really matter, right? That's what I say. I mean, the money...
Well, I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right.
So what are we going to talk about today to start this?
Well, I have a passion for wanting to know what actually works in healthcare. I don't want patients to receive drugs or surgery or whatever if it's not going to help them. It costs money and it may cause side effects, and that's not good. But one of the struggles is how do you know? How do you know what's going to help you or not? And what we'd like to have is evidence that says this works. And not only does it work in general, but it's going to work specifically in me because that's what we care about. And so I would like to explore with you and the listeners what's called an N of 1 trial. It's a very simple thing. It's published in the literature, and it can help us decide if something's going to work for you or for me. Because we don't always have a randomized controlled trial where half the people get something and half of the people don't. And then you measure it very carefully and you see what happens. We don't always have that. And even if we did, it may not actually work for you as an individual.
So let me.
This is something you can do.
Let me decipher that a little bit for non-scientists or math nerds. So the internet is full of having your glass of wine a day does this for you, studies show. Eating chocolate does this for you, studies show. This medicine does this for you, studies show. What you're referring to, so that N is, how do I figure out what actually works for me? Regardless of what some study, whether it's a randomized study or a faux study or whatever else, how do I actually determine what helps me, right? That's essentially what we're talking about here.
That's exactly right. Look, You're not going to do this for a chemotherapy regimen or a heart transplant. It's going to be for simple things. And I'll give you some examples. And it's the kind of thing people are, would really like to know. We hear if you have high blood pressure, well, you should cut out salt because that's not good for you. Or your cholesterol is a bit elevated. Oh, well, you should stop eating saturated fats. Now, there may be some evidence that in general, maybe those are good ideas, but there's a whole lot of people, and I'm one of them, where salt has no impact on my blood pressure. And why take out something that you enjoy if it really isn't going to affect you? And so an N of 1 trial is a chance to test that out in a very simple way. And if it really doesn't affect you, then enjoy your salt or enjoy your steak, because I certainly enjoy my salt and I enjoy my steak.
So this is really becoming a little bit of a scientist and being intentional and observing what you're doing by, I'm assuming, introducing or subtracting something and then observing. So let's use one example and sort of walk through how you would do this.
Let's exactly do that, because I don't want this to sound so hypothetical or theoretical. Okay, so let's say you have high blood pressure and you read, oh, I'm not supposed to eat salt. I should cut it down as much as I can. So many of us have home blood pressure monitors, or you can buy one. They're not a big deal. So you measure your blood pressure for a number of days at the same time of day. And you say, okay, well, this is my baseline. Now I'm going to reduce salt. For the next month, I'm going to reduce salt. And then you keep measuring your blood pressure. And at the end of the month, you say, well, maybe that made a difference. So then you say, well, maybe it did, maybe it didn't. So I'm going to go back to my old diet. And the next month, I go back to my old diet and I measure my blood pressure, and it has gone down, or it hasn't gone down, or it's gone up, or it hasn't gone up. And you repeat this a few different times, and then you will know. And obviously, it's great to talk to your doctor as you go through all this.
Definitely, yeah.
That you're salt sensitive or you're not. Or you do the same thing with, you eat whatever you want versus you cut out the saturated fats. And then in this case, you would have to get your blood cholesterol measured a couple different times. But then you would know whether it really makes a difference for you. Because if it doesn't make a difference for you, then enjoy the food or the salt or the wine before bed, because people say, oh, don't have alcohol before you go to sleep because that'll mess up your sleep.
And that is actually one that have experimented with myself, is wine. Like, I like to have a glass of wine, but I want to get up early and I have lots of amazing things I want to do and I want to have the energy to do it. And I've experimented not drinking and how I feel each morning. And I'll usually do it a week on where I'm just not drinking and I have tons of energy. And then I go back to having a glass or a glass and a half. Well, we'll call it two glasses of wine, and then how I feel each morning. And I've discovered that it makes sense for me to not have wine if I want to get up early and have energy, because I'm a little bit more groggy. I'm a little bit more stuffy. And I just did that through trial and error. So is that like a very basic example of what you're talking about?
That's a very basic example. I mean, I don't think you have the Oura Ring. I know you have one of those things that measures.
The Whoop.
Whoop. So some people have an Oura Ring, some people have a Whoop. There are various sleep app things. The Apple iPhone, I think, does some things. Or you can do something as simple as a sleep diary. How many hours did I sleep last night? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how restful did it feel? And, people say, well, don't eat within 2 hours of going to bed. Well, try eating late and do your diary for a week, and then go for the next week and don't eat after 5 p.m. or whatever. And then record it in your diary or look at your Oura Ring, and do the same with alcohol, or do the same with a hot shower before you go to bed. The problem is that if it's so anecdotal, it's hard to know if it's really working. But if you systematically say, I'm taking a hot shower every night this week, I'm going to look at my sleep pattern. And next week, I'm not taking my shower at night, and I'm going to do the same thing. And now you have some evidence on which to adjust your life or not adjust your life.
The first thing I think about is, this sounds like work. And it just takes some intentionality, right? Nothing comes without effort. So definitely there's some work involved, whether it's keeping a diary or wearing your Apple Watch or your Oura Ring or your Whoop to bed. But it just takes that a little bit of intentionality to pay attention, so we just don't keep repeating the same cycles. So I don't think it's really that much work. And how do we do this easily? Because this is something new, and new things are always hard to do.
Well, motivation and continuing things is a challenge, whether it's your exercise, maintaining a good diet, or doing activities that you've never done before. that's always a challenge. Now, if folks are starting to use the heroic approach, you can add it to one of your tasks for the day.
Yeah, one of your targets.
And you can say, okay, I'm going to do my sleep measurement project this week. And that would remind you every week to do it. And I completely agree with the way you're talking about this, Roger. It's not really work. You're going to have dinner. You're going to have a glass of wine or not. It's the intentionality. It's just saying, I can be a little bit of a scientist in my own life. And you will be amazed how much you will learn about yourself and what makes the difference in your life with these simple observations.
One thing I like about this approach is that when you build some muscles in doing it, it gives you something that is critical to happiness, and that's agency. I feel like I have some control over the destiny of how my day goes or my life goes. Not total, but I at least have some control or hand on the wheel by experimenting with myself rather than just feeling like life just always happens to me.
I think that's right.
So I have a question. When I get my blood work done, I think it's every 6 months I go, and I track, where my cholesterol is and everything. And it's always been really great. And lately it's been trending up. My doctor noticed it, and nothing significant, but it's still not high, but I see the trend. How might I experiment? Because I definitely, most likely what will happen with the doctor when it gets to some level, he's going to suggest a medication, which is probably what I don't want to do. So how might I experiment with that?
I think exactly what we've talked about. I think I would, next time you meet with your doctor, you'd say, well, I'm concerned that my cholesterol's inching up, and I know that some people feel that your diet may affect it. But I also have heard that not everybody reacts the same way to diet. Dr. Jones, would it be okay if we did a little study on me where I would eat what I want? And, I don't know the magic number. Probably a month is enough to be able to tell a difference. And maybe he orders 6 different cholesterol levels, one each month. He just gives you an order for it. And you go into your local blood lab and you say, okay, this month I'm going to eat whatever I want. Next month, I'm going to be careful. The third month, I'm going to eat whatever I want, so on and so forth. And then you will have 6 different blood cholesterols that will correspond to what you did that month. And then you sit back down with your doctor in 6 months, since you're seeing him every 6 months, and you say, here's the data. What do you think? Do you think I should maintain this stricter diet? Or am I one of those people where genetically it doesn't make a difference? And if I end up having to be on a statin, so be it. But I won't feel guilty that I'm not starving myself, because in fact, it really doesn't help me.
I love that. I was thinking of an experiment I just did that illustrates this point outside of the medical realm. Because this idea, the whole point of, I think, what you're talking about is just be your own scientist with your own body and your own life, and have a little bit of intentionality. After I have a coach that I use, and about a month and a half ago, we all committed to doing one thing different in our life every day. And the thing that I committed to was every morning, I'm going to kiss my wife. Even if she's sleeping and doesn't even know it, I'm going to kiss her just as a ritual. That's an experiment. And, my observation so far through a month and a half is most of the time she's sleeping when I'm getting up and doing things. So I don't think she knows it, but it changes how I think about things. That's an example of an experiment that's well outside the medical area, right? Or the physical area. So you can be a scientist. I like that.
Well, and what I would challenge you with is the next month, don't kiss her in the morning.
Oh,
and then see whether it makes a difference. And I would also ask your wife, and I would say, you may have noticed I have been kissing you every morning. How does that make you feel? And then the next month, so I would test, because, does it really look? There's no harm in kissing your wife every morning. But if you really want to know how much impact it's having, you test it out.
Great. Well, I love this. Now our job is to slowly become a scientist in our life. Hey, Sherlock. Bobby, thanks for sharing. What are we going to talk about next month? Do you know yet?
Well, we might talk about the role of smiling and how it affects your brain chemistry. And we'll revisit this issue of testing it out in yourself. So maybe that's what we'll talk about next time.
I love that. I put you on the spot there. We can change that if we have to. But I am smiling now. And Bobby, can't wait to talk to you next month.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to take a little baby step you can take in the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but rock life. It's always hard to get that out. All right. In the next 7 days, 1 or 2 challenges. Go buy a game. Maybe even if you have all of your Christmas shopping done, go buy a game for yourself. They're inexpensive, they're great fun, and they create great memories. Option 2 is find one thing you can do an N+1 experiment on for yourself. What is it that you can add to your life or subtract from your life, and take note over an appropriate time frame, say 30 days, to see the impact it has on your life relative to when you reintroduce it. Sounds like fun. Put on your scientist hat. Some of these experiments that Bobby was talking about, I've been doing targets with my Heroic app, where I have things I want to do every day and work and in love and energy. And today, the last few days, I feel sort of melancholy, just sort of out of it. I don't know if it's allergies or what it is. And I'm supposed to do some burpees and some sit-ups and row for 1,000 meters. And I don't really feel like doing it. But what I've learned through my training is when you don't feel like doing things and you're a little off, you almost have to double down on the things that you know help support energy. So I'm going to do them. I'm going to double down even though I don't feel like it, because consistency, as Ryan Holiday says, is a superpower. Hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and we will chat next week. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance reference is historical and does not guarantee future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. Make sure you consult your legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions.